Hello everyone! Today I'm revisiting a film I talked about in February 2022, Star Trek the Motion Picture, but this time it's the Director's Edition. Released in 1979 and directed by Robert Wise, Star Trek the Motion Picture brings back the cast of Gene Roddenberry's space adventure series a decade after the show's cancellation. The characters reunite aboard the Starship Enterprise to investigate a vast, deadly cloud that's on a collision course with Earth. I won't pretend to be the biggest Star Trek expert in the world, but I did come to the realization last year that the series of 6 films featuring the original cast is probably my favorite film series. I think I raised a few eyebrows last year when I said that, but it's true. There's no other film series out there that I enjoy as much or as consistently, and I don't subscribe to the even numbers only mentality. I like all 6 without exception. Now, are they all created equal? No, but I like all 6, and I'm sticking to that. If you'd like to hear my first impressions and general thoughts on Star Trek the Motion Picture, I suggest checking out that first review. Most of my observations still stand, and I'm going to try my best not to repeat myself here, so you can think of that as a part 1. What I'm going to do today is discuss the Director's Edition, go more in depth on a couple plot points, and share any new opinions I have on second and third viewing. Most fans seem to be in agreement that the Director's Edition is far superior to the theatrical release. Unfortunately, I am not familiar enough with the theatrical cut to identify on my own what was added, subtracted, or changed, but I did peruse a list of the alterations, and now I'm not sure which version I watched last year because some of the new material I could have sworn I saw. Now maybe I saw it in a couple clips that I watched on YouTube after the fact, but I'm all confused. And it doesn't help that there are several versions of the movie: theatrical cut, Director's Edition, new Director's Edition in 4K, which I believe this was, and then there's the TV edit, which has alternate takes of scenes and things missing and things added, and usually a Director's Edition is longer than the theatrical cut. It's the director's opportunity to restore elements he was forced to remove because the powers that be deemed the movie too long. But Robert Wise's version of Star Trek the Motion Picture is about 8 minutes shorter. Extraneous and redundant lines have been removed, scenes have been trimmed ever so slightly, and as someone who fastidiously edits her own videos, I have learned that shaving off even a 1/10 of a second here and there can make a big difference. There are also a lot of visual and special effects updates, CGI touch-ups and improvements that give it a more polished look and render certain scenes the way they were intended. I'm not sure how I feel about people using the CGI to fix old movies. Restoration and preservation is one thing, but when you start making changes, I don't know. After a certain point, it's no longer the original work. This is not the same film that audiences saw in theaters in December '79. I also think people can be tempted sometimes to go too far, tweaking things that don't really need tweaking just for the heck of it, just because they can do things now with new technology that they couldn't do before. But on the other hand, CGI can take away little distractions that unfairly affect how the work is perceived, so it's a complicated issue. But in this instance, I can't argue with the results. For the most part, the visuals are fantastic, especially when you watch in optimal conditions. The bigger the screen, the better. The VJ visuals are mesmerizing, even if they do resemble a Windows 95 screensaver. Typically when people discuss Star Trek the Motion Picture, they focus on the visual effects sequences, which were directed by Douglas Trumbull. But as impressive as they are, I would argue that they are not sufficient unto themselves. Effects alone can't carry a movie. Audio is of vital importance, and the first 10 minutes of this film are driven by music and sound. I'm not sure how much I talked about Jerry Goldsmith's score in my first video. I know that I mentioned that the main theme became the Next Generation theme, but I can't remember talking about the overture. It's a beautiful, delicate piece that conveys a sense of wonderment and yearning. It's really gorgeous, and with nothing to look at but a star field, formerly a black screen, for 3 minutes, it encourages you to just soak it in. Then, after the Paramount logo, that strong, energetic main theme plays over the opening titles, followed by the introduction to the cloud as the Klingons encounter it and are attacked. What you hear is crucial even within the context of the narrative. The V'ger cloud makes this awesome sound, which I now know was created with a special aluminum version of an insane instrument called a blaster beam. You hear this noise again and again throughout the film, and it's dark and unsettling, and it's so cool that you never get sick of it. Plus, it's just an awesome name. Blaster Beam! I want a blaster beam for Christmas. What instrument do you play? Blaster beam! Besides the blaster beam, Goldsmith employs other creative instrumentation in his score, including piano, organ, xylophone, and, I think, castanets? Since I'm now more familiar with James Horner's score for The Wrath of Khan, which I did a whole video on, I can detect where he apparently took some cues from Goldsmith. Not that anything in the two scores is the same per se, but there are just some spots where the one made me think of the other, and I think that it must have been intentional on Horner's part to tie the movies together. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that, it's just a coincidence, but I think it works pretty well. One movie is a sequel to the other, you want the music to have some commonality. Plus, Goldsmith gave a nod to Alexander Courage by playing the original series theme in the 3 instances when Kirk does the captain's log. So visuals and sound often work together here, like in the wormhole sequence where the picture becomes distorted and so does everyone's speech, or in the sequence where the Enterprise enters the cloud. Visuals and music and sound effects are complementary. They go hand in hand to create a mood and an experience. Speaking of the Enterprise, I must confess the sequence showing off the ship in space dock felt twice as long to me this time. I don't know if it's extended in the director's edition. Don't get me wrong, the refitted Enterprise is very impressive with an almost pearlescent glow, and I understand the effects team wanting to display it from every conceivable angle to show off their hard work, but it's a lot. Is 4.5 minutes really necessary? There are only so many reactions Kirk and Scotty could come up with for this sequence, and sometimes I don't even know what exactly they're reacting to. At one point, Kirk gazes at the ship like a groom watching his bride come down the aisle, and Goldsmith chose that exact moment to emphasize the bells, like church bells, wedding bells. What are we doing? On first viewing, I thought, oh, this isn't that bad. The ship looks great, and even if it does get a little old after a while, the music is pretty and rich. On second viewing, I thought, okay, this could have been half as long. I do like the reality check, though, when after all that romanticized splendor and majesty, Admiral Kirk arrives on the bridge and it's a noisy, disorganized mess. One of the most lauded changes in the director's edition is an added sound during the transporter accident. It's already a disturbing scene, sudden, hopeless, and powerfully suggestive, and then you have this line,
"What we got back didn't live long, fortunately."
Yikes. This justifies Dr. McCoy's reluctance to have his molecules scrambled across space, something I agree with 1,000%, and in light of what just happened 5 minutes ago, their cheekiness doesn't seem to be in the best taste. But the big thing that was added during the malfunction scene is a strangled scream of terror and pain. They really wanted to up the rating from G to PG, and that's how they did it. Something I didn't fully put together is that Kirk is partly to blame for this. I didn't catch it the first time, but one of the two victims, Commander Sonak, is the Vulcan Kirk was talking to here. Kirk chastises him for not being on the Enterprise already, since they're leaving 8 hours ahead of schedule. So Sonak attempts to board sooner using the transporter, unaware that the transporter, like many other things on the ship, is not yet working properly. I've been informed that the novelization gives the other victim, the woman, an identity as well, making her Kirk's ex-wife, I believe. But I don't think that detail necessarily improves the scene, nor does it line up with how Shatner plays it, so I don't view that as canon. It might have been an official novelization, but to me, if it's not in the movie, it's not concrete fact. And quite frankly, this is going to put some people off, and I'm sorry, but I do find it irritating whenever someone acts like you should know a fact about a movie and then says, it's in the novelization. The only confusing thing about the scream is that I could have sworn I'd heard it when I watched the scene before. This is the thing that makes me wonder if what I saw the first time was the director's edition after all. It was a Blu-ray, it was excellent quality, but nothing about it said that it was the director's edition, so it doesn't quite make sense. Plus, I would have said the scream was there, but Spock's tear was not. That's an element the director's edition makes more clear, the parallel between Spock and V'Ger. It's introduced early on when V'Ger's consciousness distracts Spock during the Vulcan ceremony that would mark the completion of his quest for pure logic, all emotion renounced. The first time around, I didn't fully grasp that what's going on with Spock parallels what's going on with V'Ger. Spock is the one to recognize the so-called intruder as a living entity, to translate its quest, and understand its insatiable hunger for an answer. He comes to see in it a mirror image of himself, unsure of his place, driven to pursue a strictly logical intelligence, but discovering that, without emotion, there's something lacking. The director's edition drives home this connection by including the part where he sheds a tear for V'Ger, weeping for what V'Ger does not have. Seeing Spock cry is weird, but he also laughs in this movie, so everything's a bit upside down. I still feel like this element isn't as fully realized as it could have been, but the director's edition at least brings it together more. I know some people criticize the plot as a lazy reworking of the original series episode, The Changeling, but I don't mind that. I still see V'Ger as an intriguing antagonist. It's an immensely powerful and deadly force, but there's also innocence there in the childlike simplicity of its quest. Its determined hunt for meaning and validation holds significance for Spock, but it also echoes humanity's desire to understand its origins and purpose, its search for fulfillment, its craving for a tangible relationship with its creator. While I find the resolution a little I appreciate the philosophical angle. It's science fiction doing its thing, using futuristic tech and alien life forms to create a looking glass for mankind. The technical aspect continues to be relevant. The film references Spoiler! The film references the Voyager space program. The probes Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were launched in 1977, 2 years before this film's release, so when they said Voyager 6, people made the connection. Those probes are still out there, though. Way out there. I looked it up. They reached some milestone a couple of years ago. Don't ask me. I don't know about all this space stuff. And they're still collecting data. So this element continues to be relevant. Plus, a machine gaining so much knowledge that it becomes a conscious entity, a sentient living thing that starts asking existential questions. I think that concept is more timely now than ever. The featured newcomer is Persis Khambatta, the Indian model-turned-actress who took a bold step in having her head shaved for the role of Deltan Navigator Lieutenant Ilia. There's a great behind-the-scenes video of that on YouTube. The character is professional to the utmost, but Ilia also projects an aura of softness and kindness. Both times when someone is injured on the bridge, she's the first to jump up and try to help them, and the director's edition includes a scene where she takes away Chekhov's pain. These traits are discarded when her form becomes the embodiment of V'ger and she takes on the rigidity and blankness of a machine. But vestiges of Ilia linger, and they surface when a memory is stoked, and her eyes take on a vulnerable, beseeching expression. There are moments when Ilia exhibits a warmth that's lacking from our main crew, and that is something I sorely miss. Everybody's just a little bit off. For much of the film, Spock is aloof, giving his old friends the cold shoulder, but he's not the only one. When we first see him, Admiral Kirk is terse and distracted, all business and stern command presence. He just doesn't feel like the same guy. It's only when he has a private talk with Scotty that it's like, oh, there he is.
Gave her back, sir? I doubt it was that easy with Nagura.
You might.
Kirk is on edge, Spock doesn't want to talk to anyone, Bones is ticked that he has to be there, they're all questioning each other's motives. In general, we're far from the camaraderie I like to see that's prominently displayed in most of the other 5 movies. That lack of playfulness really sticks out to me, so what bits of humor there are, I find myself latching onto and even magnifying in an attempt to restore the balance of sobriety and levity that's usually present. It's like everyone has to find themselves. They're not quite the crew we came to know on the show, nor are they as they will be in the sequel films. They're somewhere in between. Fortunately, come the second half, people are thawing and relationships are starting to gel again, and things are more or less restored to the way they should be by the end, which feels very like an original series episode closing. This video is expanding on my previous review, not contradicting it, so I'm not here with a different opinion than I had before. I still enjoy the film overall, I still like seeing the characters get reintroduced, I still think the costumes are awful. I will say it was more exciting the first time when I didn't know what anything was or what was going to happen. The visuals were all brand new and awe-inspiring, and the story was engrossing. On second viewing, the mystery was gone, and it hasn't been long enough since I saw it the first time that I've forgotten the plot. And without the questions, what's happening here, what's going to happen, constantly rolling through my mind, the movie seemed longer, and I was prone to restlessness. Even though this is the shorter version, I really felt those 3 or 4 prolonged, slow-moving sequences. There are an awful lot of shots of people staring at a view screen, reacting, while the visual spectacle pushes forward at a glacial pace. Also, I talked about split focus in my first video, what it is, and how it was one of Robert Wise's trademarks. My update is that I do find it distracting. It's a nifty, stylistic choice, but it's used rather heavily, and I'm not sure that it isn't excessive. Plus, the blurring in the center bothers me. It makes me wonder if there's something wrong with my eyes, or my glasses are smudged. But, you know, this is the kind of science fiction film that favors art and style over action, and it's helpful to be aware of that going in so that you can judge it appropriately, so you'll be prepared. You know what you're getting. Slow-moving, artsy-fartsy science fiction isn't really my cup of tea, but I am inclined to be more lenient with this because it's Star Trek. It has Star Trek energy, it has Star Trek music, it has these characters, and it has these people playing these characters. There's a lot of exaggerated negativity out there about this film, and 3, and 5, and that's too bad, because they've each got some great stuff, and there's a lot here to like. So those are my thoughts on Star Trek the Motion Picture, the 2022 Director's Edition. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to hearing what you all think in the comments below. Thanks for watching!